Good morning. Salot inig abine zoom. Doon zinig happy National Indigenous Peoples Day on the Dene Yati, and now to the Tilosi celebrate, be proud, sides, hunt, and it's also summer solstice. Kolio, Dena atlaw lilay, Dena summer solstice. But anyways, Gabine Zoom. Dladot, say hi, say what's up. Dogots and Ozzy, throw it in the comments and see Willa Janvier, who shaped in Taylor's tours in Lalash, Saskatchewan, Clearwater River Dene Nation band member Hisley and Dunzinege Treaty 4 territory, yours in all Huntati Dana Dlians and Dunzinege, no, but guess who's Cassidy Villabrin Baracus Hulye Chalakwase Hay River at Izan Hay River I believe but Calgary Edmonton ne ya and Denedit Adilohole Dene Heliasa so as a but search in the internet and but a podcast hul anya yeah, dene ta kulye kud dene de a person dene susline de and in Delene I know they say dene wa the original dene people and nunide dene susline de ridion de la so different areas de sadune yet hit others but don't do journalism konisiga and other bahalyas tias na doing zinike. So happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Let me know what you guys are doing at Daisy doing zinike. What kind of events are going on? I know I got no vehicle today, so I can't travel to Regina. I know there's a grand entry this morning at 11, but it's all good. Maybe this evening. So on it. But anyways, I will get this going. Let's bring him on in. Cassidy Villabrin Baracus. Good morning, Atlanita. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Nezu. I'm good. I'm good. It's it was an early morning, late night, early morning for me, but I seem to be functioning. That's a good thing. So, we'll just get started. I want to say thank you, Masi Choner Osu, for joining me on my podcast, my show. And I'll just ask you to introduce yourself for the audience here.
Yeah. First off, thank you so much for bringing me on your show. Big fans. This is a great place to be. Yeah, my name is Cassidy Vilbrin Baracus. I'm currently based in Victoria, British Columbia, on unceded Lekwungen and Wasanich territory. I'm originally from Calgary, Alberta. That's where I grew up on Treaty 6 or Treaty 7 territory. But I was born in Yellowknife, and my family is from Hay River. Yeah, and so I'm a podcaster and radio producer. I work with a couple different companies, work with local radio station CFUV 101.9 FM, and they also work with Canada Land and do some freelancing with the CBC and a couple other places as well.
Oh, nice, nice. That's cool. Yeah. So, how did you get into kind of journalism and podcasting, all that stuff? What led to the moment when you wanted to do that?
Yeah, so growing up, the CBC was always on in my home. My mom was a radio producer for the CBC North in Yellowknife, and my dad is from Eastern Canada, kind of like from Hull, Montreal, Toronto kind of area. And so the CBC was like always a big fixture in my family, and it was always on road trips and things like that. So I always had like a love of radio and a love of like telling stories through the audio landscape. And kind of when podcasting became a thing, kind of like in the early to mid aughts, and I kind of like got into it kind of like in the 2010 around there. I just like was instantly hooked and loved it. And I always wanted to get into podcasting and get into journalism through like an audio kind of framework, but I never really knew the steps that I could take to get there. So it wasn't until COVID hit. Before that, I was working in a restaurant, and my restaurant closed down, and I was out of work, like many Canadians, collecting CERB payments, and I just like was looking for something new, and my local radio station here in Victoria, CFUV, was hiring an Indigenous media producer, and I was like, "Oh, this seems interesting." So I just applied, and I ended up getting it. and it started a journey that is has been like a dream come true in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Mhm. That's cool. It's things happen for a reason sometimes, and that sounds like one of it. You were born in Yellowknife, you mentioned, but your family comes from Hay River, the far north of Dene people. Did you? I know you said you grew up in the city, so you're urban Dene, just like myself. And did you get to be around? Any of the storytelling up north? Did you get to be a part of it? Hear the elders or anything that was going on up north?
Yeah, so, my mom really worked hard to, bring us up north as much as possible, so, we go up to Hay River probably about, like, 2 or 3 times a year, so I got to grow up really close with my great aunties and my great uncles, and they're, like, that generation like, my great aunties were, like, the first ones in our family to start, like, working wage jobs, but my uncles were hunters, and they never, like, held a job, but they hunted. That's how they supported each other, and it was they're also through their lives was, like, a time of great kinda change, I think, for Dene people in Hay River, but I got to grow up with them, and some of my fondest memories are eating my great auntie's pies, and hanging out with them. They have this, like, really big, raspberry bush outside their house, so I remember eating berries there, and they're really sweet, and I was the baby of the family, so I got doted on a lot. Yeah, and then my mom is also, did radio, but she also did drama a lot, and so she'd do this skit where she was the old woman, and she was recounting the story about her wedding day, and she'd do this all the time, and it essentially the story is like she's young and she's getting married to this guy, and he's like a hunter from a different family, and they're kind of shy and don't really know each other, and so they have to like go off together. And she's like making tea, but she's so nervous that she like spills the tea on the guy's hand, and he yells, and then the dogs go running off into the wilderness, and he has to go chase them, and she has like reservations about like how good of a hunter he is if he can't even track his own dogs, and then finally comes back with the dogs, and she like makes him some tea and some bannock, and he puts on his like big hunting mitts. He's like holding the tea so he doesn't get burned again. So yeah, like my mom really worked hard to teach me the stories that she could and to raise me well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's I bet it almost feels like a Dene gathering every time you went up north. Everybody uh it's a little different, when you go home to your community after, living in in the urban setting for sure. Now you've started this podcast. Tell me a bit about this podcast. I came across it online, and I was sitting, it was up late, and I always that's kind of how I started was uh you could never find the Dene language, on the internet. I would and it's funny you talk about you're from way up north, you know. I always knew there's Dene people as just, intrigued by Dene people up there, how they live or who they were, who am I kind of thing. And, to share those stories. So, tell me a bit about your podcast and, how you got started. What made you start?
Yeah, so, when I got the job at CTV, that was, like, my first entrance into audio, and I didn't know anything about making podcasts except that I loved it, and I listened to a lot of them, and so, I got some training with some of the staff at CTV, and I just started making it, and I settled on the name Dene Talk, because I think as you might have mentioned in your intro, I use Dene as like people or like human being, because what Dene Talk is about is talking to Indigenous people, hearing their stories, but also just centering like the brilliance of Indigenous people, the beauty of Indigenous people, and kind of centering that aspect because I think so much of the way that mainstream media engages with Indigenous people in general is very pejoratively or through the three Ds, like drunk, dancing, or dead. And I just really want to like showcase the brilliance of Indigenous people the way that I saw it. And so, yeah, like going through the process, it was pretty much just winging it, especially like through the first couple interviews and just doing the best I could do. But worked out in the end, which was really nice.
Mhm,
And I got to talk to some really amazing people, and have some really amazing conversations. And it's like, as soon as I started doing it, I was like, right, this is the thing that I want to be doing for the rest of my life. This is the thing that makes me happy. This is the thing that I love, like meeting people, talking to people, hearing their stories, and then like writing the stories into scripts and editing it into audio. Like that's like the thing, that I want to do.
mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's something I don't really do, but it's a little different. I tell people this. Dene Yati, Dene Yati, that's my language. That's is my first language. So it's a little different when you put the Western and Dene world together in journalism, or I guess in sharing story. But you know, how one of the things I was told is that you might run out of content. How do you go about finding your guests? It's where do you look?
Yeah. So I do it through a couple different ways. The first way is word of mouth. Um, just talking to my friends and listening to the things that they're really interested in. I have a really good friend, Jordan Cooey. Uh, Shout out Jordan Cooey. He has a radio show called Denim Regalia Friday nights at 5 p.m. And he's Gwitchin. And he when we met, we just started talking, and he told me about the people that he's interested in, the things that he's interested in, and that's like how I started like finding other people. Social media is a great way too of finding people online. A lot of like younger folks use like Instagram, which is like a great way to find people. And I think there's no shortage of like brilliant indigenous people out there in the world. They're literally everywhere, and there's just so many interesting people that I feel like there's never enough time to talk to everyone out there. And so for me, it just seems like it's an endless bounty of people to talk to, and the endless bounty of stories to hear. And yeah, yeah. So it's like feel like it could go on forever.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. I have a long list that I try to get through if this person can make it, and it's a little different. Other people they record, and I go live with people, and people really enjoy that. So, one of the things you started off your podcast was about resilience. What was that all about? That do you have a theme, or do you pick what, or just kind of go based off the person that you find off the internet?
Yeah, so the first episode, I didn't really know what I wanted to explore. I just kind of knew who I wanted to talk to, and the first person that I want to talk to is this person, Shaylee Robinson. She's Lekwungen and Hakwaimam, from here in Victoria and kind of like around Vancouver Island, kind of up on some of the Gulf Islands. And she's a burlesque dancer. She's queer, and she's like one of the most outspoken people I've met. And especially when I moved to Victoria, coming from Alberta, she was one of the first people I met that made me really proud to be Indigenous, which is like a terrible thing to say, but I think like the indigenous people on the coast are a lot more feisty sometimes than maybe like indigenous folks in Calgary. I don't know if that's like a, a fair thing to say or not. But yeah, like really inspired a lot of like pride in being indigenous. And so I want to talk to her because she's very like outspoken, she's very intelligent, she's very articulate, and I knew that she'd be good radio. Like just having conversation, I was right, like it was great radio. And I knew I also wanted to talk to my auntie, Gwen, because she's also very intelligent and articulate. And so I did these two interviews, and I had this tape, and I was trying to find like the through line between these two different people's stories, and that's where I came out with the theme of resilience. And I think being indigenous is being resilient is like bred into who we are. Um and I like some people might have like might have some thoughts about resilience, and like a lot of indigenous people like stop calling us resilient, but I think for me I just really want to explore the ways in which we've endured throughout our life, and not only endured but thrived through following our passions, following the things that make us happy, finding our own path. Because as at the same time as I was making this story, I was doing the same thing, like following my own path. And so I think especially at the beginning, trying to find the themes of the episodes, I just followed the story and let the story lead me to the place. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of the way it's got to go. It's out of your hands. You know, kind of make it come to you.
Mm.
That's really because once you try to force it, it turns out to be crap. You know, really, it does. It does work that way. You know,
Yeah.
you talk about you know, you got resilience, resistance, resurgence, and all that stuff. And as you mentioned, I want to bring this back to yourself there. About you and you know how you wanted to be, maybe you felt more indigenous or more Dene, as you probably you weren't around that, so you know you probably felt a bit disconnected at the time. You know, what are you doing now, you know, going forward? You know, you're sharing people's stories, but for yourself to find another piece about yourself to be stronger as an indigenous person. You know, it is Indigenous Peoples Day. You know, we got to be proud of who we are. What are you doing?
Yeah, so, I like, one of the biggest things I do is, like, I love calling my grandparents, my mushum and my grandma. They're both in their 80s. They're both, very, very old now, and so just talking to them and hearing their stories, and just try to make as much time for that as possible. Because yeah, like, my grandma, she's getting older, but she has moments where her memory is very clear, and just the stories that she tells me about growing up, in Catliodechi and having to, like, cross the river to go see Elvis movies. She was obsessed with Elvis, still is obsessed with Elvis, and just, like, that was just so crazy to me because she was talking about, like, going right before the breakup. And so the ice isn't really stable yet, and it kind of melts a little bit before the riverbank, and she had to jump with her friend over onto the ice and then jump off the other side and like try not to fall in. It's like only to see like an Elvis movie, which is like
Yeah.
and like the like Hay River is like it's a big river and it does really it moves really quickly. So like if you fall in it like I have family members who've drowned unfortunately trying to swim across. So it's very dangerous. And then hearing my Mushroom story, he's Métis, he's from kind of Fort Chip area and he's a residential school survivor as well. And he's told me some stories about that, and he's also told me stories about going hunting with his father and being out on the land. And so I think for me, it's just listening to my grandparents talk as much as possible, hearing their stories, and then talking to my aunties. They hold so much knowledge and kind of memory.
Hmm.
Yeah, because as you said, it's hard. Like I'm in Victoria, which is very far away from Denide, very far removed from other Dene people. And so it's been kind of isolating in a lot of ways, but there are also a lot of people here, like my friend Jordan, and I have some other friends around that like make me feel comfortable being here as well. Because I think like urban spaces are indigenous spaces as well, right? Like throughout Canada, a lot of people think that they're in like they're colonial spaces, and they are, but they're also indigenous spaces because indigenous people live there. Like Edmonton, a lot of indigenous people live in Edmonton, and a lot of indigenous people live throughout Canada in these cities. And
Hmm.
so I think, yeah, just finding the people and sharing stories, sharing times. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's all about coming together. You know, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm sure there's people all over Canada coming together. I don't know if we got anything going on here in Moose Jaw, but I know in Regina they are. You know, it's very important. You know, it's such as Indigenous Peoples Day, and it is Pride Month. You know, are
Mhm.
those something topics or stories that you'll be touching on probably, you know, for the future episodes? I think you mentioned you're on a hiatus right now, a little pause right now, but what are some of the other topics that you wish to touch on?
Yeah, yeah. I think like it being Pride Month, that's such an important concept to kind of talk about, right? Because um it's really like fascinating, right? Because I think like the church has really pushed this idea of like heteronormativity on indigenous communities and really like pushed the idea like there's only men and there's women and men are like this and women are like this, and pushed a lot of like homophobia into our communities, unfortunately. And so I think like it's really interesting to talk about the ways in which many different communities have different words for different genders and different perspectives. Like I know in Nehiwa there are like words for like a man who dresses as a woman, but it's like not pejorative. It's just like a description. And then there's also this one story is hearing about a Haida artifact. It's like a mask, and the mask presents the raven as the masculine, and it opens and presents the raven as the feminine. And so it's there are ways of exploring gender that different indigenous cultures have used throughout time. And so I think it's like talking about that again and kind of like revisiting the different ways in which gender, sexuality have been present in Indigenous communities before contact, something that I'm really passionate about. And I think there are a lot of great people out there doing the work and kind of uncovering that, like people like Emily Riddle or Jay Simpson. And so those are like the stories that I'm really interested in telling. I'm also really interested in like music. I have a radio show, so talking to different musicians. Like I had a chance to sit down with Anaknid. She's an amazing OG Cree, Indigenous queer artist from Montreal, and just kind of talking about how she weaves like traditional storytelling in with like kind of electronic dance music. I think it's really fascinating. So yeah, just really exploring different topics, different ideas. The other thing I'm really interested in is like futurisms and indigenous futurisms. Um, and so really discussing like the ways that we can like think about the future in different ways. And yeah, yeah, I don't know if that that makes sense, but
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
things
it
that
does.
interest me.
I'm definitely hearing you. And you mentioned futurisms. Okay, Indigenous Peoples Day and Pride Month, they go together. Indigenous people over the years have been battling with colonialism and all this. And you can probably take the Pride LGBTQ community in the same way. We're both in the same boat, kind of thing, and
Mhm.
fighting our way through society, and trying to make a presence. What do you think? It looks like, is it slow going for the LGBTQ community, because they're still new, and everything that has been going on in the last 10, 20 years. I mean, um, gay people, they've always been around, but the acceptance part, like us as Indigenous people, we're not always there. We're still trying
Mm.
to trying to get there too. So what do you think on the two, in that sense?
Yeah, I think like well, like, for LGBTQ2S plus folks, I think it really comes down to like the frontline people who put their lives and put their bodies out there every day to like fight for acceptance, fight for rights, and fight for visibility. From Marsha, like throwing the first brick at Stonewall to like all the work that's being done now. And I think like I think that there's been a lot of great work that has been done, but we're seeing kind of like a backpedaling and a targeting specifically from conservative groups against trans folks, against drag queens, drag kings, and so I think that things are getting more complicated, more violent, and I think now more than ever we need to show solidarity with queer folks as much as possible and stand up and fight against any amount of transphobia, homophobia, and bigotry that we see. Similarly to how I think being Indigenous is you have to endure so much racism and so much stereotyping, and we need to fight that. But it also means that we have to fight racism towards Black folks, towards Afro folks, towards Asian folks as well, right? Like build solidarity. We all need to stand up together to fight bigotry because an attack against one of us is an attack against all of us, right? And
Hmm.
I think that we really need to stand up as much as possible.
Hmm.
I think like, over the last year we've seen like kind of how violent white supremacy can be. And I think that it really showed how organized it can be with like the trucker protests, Freedom Convoy. And I think we really need to fight back against that as much as possible and like stand up and protect each other as much as possible.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I think like when you think about like when I think about the future, I like to I'm a short-term pessimist but a long-term optimist. And so I think like when I think about the future, I think there's a world where there isn't poverty in any Indigenous community throughout Canada. I dream of a world where Indigenous communities are full of language and full of like healthy familial connections and kinship ties. I think of a society where different people of different cultures, different identities, different races can all live together in peace, you know?
Mhm.
And that's the future that I want to live in, and that's the future that I want to build every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some good points you made. Your podcast, Dene Talk, you use Dene as person, as a human now, which has been around thousands of years, that alone, right? And now in 2022, what do you think of you put the two together, and now what you just shared with me, and people are sacrificing themselves just to be seen. It's kind of crazy to me, and I stand to because I've seen some youth that probably struggle, you know, the when it comes to the pride community, the gay community, and I just use that term. I don't want to get, it means everybody, just like
Mhm.
Denny means everybody. And I don't say that to point anybody out. I just want to point that out before I go into
Mm.
the conversation. But young people, when you create space for them, when you have talk about the gay community, they come together and they're happy and they're themselves. When they leave there, it's gone. It's crazy to think that in 2022, you know uh, young people sacrificing mental health, all this stuff, and they deal with what else, instead of just, how do we tell people that it's okay, you got parades everywhere, there's got to be more than done. What do you think?
Yeah, like I think that like the biggest thing that people can do is just choose kindness every day, you know? And I read somewhere that like being a leader means being boring. And I think what that means is that like don't make the cheap jokes just because you can, and try to be mindful of other people's feelings and emotions. And that sounds kind of like simple, and I think it is, because I think so much of what we do, sometimes we don't think about the implications of what we say or what we do. So I think being mindful of your words and the power that your words have, that's something like my mom always told me, because even though it doesn't feel like they do, it does. And you don't know who in the room is there, you know? So it's like making a joke that might be homophobic or transphobic. You don't know who in the room might be gay or might be trans in the room. So I think speaking rightly and doing rightly and choosing to be kind and accepting, right? Because I think the biggest thing we can do is make space for other people to feel comfortable, to feel like that they can come forward and discuss who they are, or maybe they might need help, and maybe to be a person that can be there to talk to and offer help.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the paying it, not paying it forward, just be genuine, and be yourself to somebody. That's what it's all about. I really like that, the topic, the gay community. It is Pride Month, and just what are some of the things in regards to mental health that you have seen? You seem very knowledgeable about the whole thing, about as you mentioned there, you're very passionate about it. Mental health is a big thing. What
Mm.
are some of the things that you've seen, in all the work you have done in regards to mental health that affect people within the gay community?
Yeah. So like look. the first thing I want to talk about is like my story with mental health. Like it's been a difficult journey. Because growing up for me, I grew up and went to post secondary, and during post secondary, went through like a pretty depressive stage in my life, and I really struggled with depression and struggled with anxiety and dropped out. And then my mom passed away right after that. And then so I went through a period of about 4 or 5 years of great kind of like emotional turmoil, kind of going through the stages of grief, was using a lot of drugs, using a lot of alcohol at the time, just really struggling. And coming out to the other side of that was a really amazing experience struggling through that because it gave me a lot of insight into how other people struggle through grief, through trauma. And I think a lot of folks use substances as a way to heal, or a way to stop the pain. And so for me, I think mental health is so critical, right? Because it's the thing that allows us to do everything else. Like, you can't go to work if you don't have the spoons to do it. You can't get out of bed, you can't get dressed, you can't take care of yourself, take care of your family. And I think for me, the thing that really helped me get through that process was family and friends. Like my brothers really stepped up during that time. My friends, like at that time, really helped out and helped me get through that period. And I think like if you don't have friends and family, like if I didn't have friends and family at that time, like I could be living homeless. Like I could be out on the street. I could be, like I could be dead without that. And it's just so crucial to have that support group to when going through mental health issues in your life. And I think of like so many people don't have that, right? Like how many indigenous people out there don't have that community, don't have those friends or family because they've been disrupted by colonialism, right? Or how many queer folks might not have friends and family because of their family might not be accepting, they don't feel safe in that space, right? But I think that there are spaces for people, there are communities for people, and I think like there are places out there, like if you're having feelings of like thoughts of suicide, there are like people out there to support you and help you. There are organizations that do care about you and do want to offer you support. And mental health services are so limited in Canada and so underfunded. And it's like criminal in a lot of ways, but there are people out there that do care and will support you. And I think that if you do have these feelings or you're struggling, reach out to someone. You can reach out to me, send me a message. My name is Cassidy. I can link my email in there. And yeah, just like there's always someone that's willing to help if you reach out. You just got to reach out, you know? And I reached out when I was going through that time and people helped me through that. And without that, like, I don't know where I'd be, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a huge topic to talk about too, and I like that you touch on kind of the same thing that the gay community they've got nobody. A lot of people they don't know have nobody. What do you do when you're in that state and you want to go? Okay, you want to reach out, but you don't. You could care less if you end up homeless. You know, I've gone through that process already. And how do you push yourself out to just make a phone call? You know,
Yeah. So sorry, excuse me. The first time that I kind of was struggling through it when I was in my undergrad, I was also in debate at the time, and one of the topics I heard one of the speakers talk about his personal journey with depression and how he took antidepressants. And so I just sent him a message and being like, "Hey, I was just wondering, what kind of process did you go through to get treatment?" And for me at that time, I just knew like that what was going on with me is I needed to do something because what was happening in my life wasn't working. And I was like, this isn't normal. I just need to do something. So I just reached out. He was very kind, offered a lot of support, a lot of resources, and allowed me to kind of start that journey. And then kind of like the second or third time, it's something that like my brother kind of forced me into because he's like, you're out of control. You need to like kind of rein it in. And it's kind of like that truth that you don't want to hear. Like maybe you're like, I can do it on my own, but you obviously can't. So listening to the people that care about you, and they wouldn't reach out to you they, unless you were in need, you know? And so for me, I think like it there's nothing worse than doing nothing, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, you can not reach out for help, you can continue on, but that path is not going to lead anywhere good. The other option is reaching out, and that can lead to somewhere better. And even though it may feel like you're in a really dark place that's never going to get better, there is always a way for it to get better. And for it to get better, you have to reach out and make those first steps.
Hmm.
Pick yourself up, reach out, ask for help.
Yeah, it's always continued work, and maintenance. I
Yeah.
remember late John there. He would call himself the maintenance man, but he
Mm.
was actually a counselor. You know, once you get all through this, what are some of the things you do now? It does not just go away just because you ask for help. It is maintenance, it is work, whether you've got a day or a year sobriety or any kind of healing journey. It can always come back. What do you what are some of the things that you do so you don't get to that place again?
Yeah. That's a great question. For me, I live mindfully, which sounds weird to say, but being mindful of my feelings, being mindful of my emotions, being mindful of my moods as much as possible. Um, Realizing that progress isn't necessarily linear. And whenever I go through like a particularly bad time where I'm stressed out or anxious or feeling depressed, looking back at how far I've come throughout my life, instead of looking like thinking about how difficult my situation is, like how far have I come over the last 5 years? Where am I now compared to where I was 5 years ago? And you realize that you made like a lot of progress in that time. For me, exercise. I play squash regularly with a friend. I bike a lot, go for lots of walks. Spending a lot of time outside um, really helps me feel comfortable. And something that one of my friends gets told me is like, whenever you're feeling kind of mixed up in your head, spending time outside. For me, I live by the ocean, so I go down to the ocean a lot. And that always, I think, helps me feel grounded, being out on the land. Um, and the other thing is having a support group, having people that you can reach out to. And if you're having a bad time, you can reach out and talk through it. People that care about you, that you care about. That those are the things that help me personally through it. Yeah.
Mhm. You work in radio and all that stuff. Have you ever been like, not in the mood? Because there are different we go through several different moods throughout the day. And do you ever just like, I don't want to do this, whatever, It's
Yeah.
it's funny how the mind can just take over no matter how mindful or anything you are. It's all about trying to stay grounded and do what you're supposed to do, right? Like what do you do then?
Yeah, that is the struggle, right? Like motivation, for me is something that I feel like comes very sparingly, and a lot of my time I feel so unmotivated to do anything, right? Because making radio, as you say, is it's a very creative work, and that's the magic is that it is creative and it is really it's to make radio, to write scripts, it's like the best thing that I've ever done, but it's also the most difficult thing I've ever done. And I feel like when I'm writing, like 90% of it is like pulling teeth. And 10% of it like works and flows and feels good. And that is the constant struggle of my life, um, making radio. But the thing for me is just reading, like when I feel unmotivated, I go for lots of walks. I listen to different podcasts, different radio shows that excite me, and try to read as much as possible as well. And sometimes it's something as basic as like breaking down the story structure of like we're watching Star Wars Clone Wars right now, me and my partner, and just breaking down the simple story structures. Like, okay, who are the characters? What are they going through? What's like the inciting incident? What are like the tensions at play? And thinking about it like deconstructively so that I can think about what makes a good story and then using those story tools in my own storytelling as much as possible. Yeah, it's a struggle. The only thing worse than making radio and writing for me is not making radio and writing, if that makes sense. Like it's difficult, it sucks, it kicks my butt all the time, but I can't imagine doing anything else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I like how you know it's thank you for sharing everything you have, you know, it's really tough to be able to be vulnerable, especially live on Facebook and YouTube, right? And you know, you've shared a lot of things with me, and I go to your podcast page, your website, and the first one is resilience, and then resistance, and that's your own story. You know,
Yeah.
you've connected with other people, and you've shared with me here today. You're about the resilience, how coming addiction and mental health, and fighting back against it, and now you're making your way through, going forward. You know, and I want to thank you for that. And today, Cassidy Villebrin Baracus. If there's anything else that you want to add, that's all I got for today for myself. But if there's anything else, I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Must Cho, thank you so much for bringing me on your podcast. It's great to chat. If you want to find more about me, I have a website, denetalk.ca, DENE talk.ca, has all my links and information. Yeah, and if you have any questions or you want to chat, or maybe you're going through a difficult time, or you have a story you think I should look into, send me an email, denetalkpod@gmail.com. I'm always open to chat. I love chatting. And yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. You know, I just thanks for coming on here and joining me. I know a lot of people because I do it in Dene. A lot of people, even though they don't speak it, they'll say, "Well, I don't speak it, but it's okay." But you're Dene, you know, and that's a story. You have a story too, and that needs to be told. Everybody's got a story to be told, and I really enjoy listening to yours and kind of picking your brain at you know, the things in behind that we wouldn't normally tell. I really enjoy doing that, so thank you for allowing me to do that. Masicho, and you enjoy your day. Don't have another coffee.
Okay, I'll try my best. No promises.
Alrighty, masicho. Alrighty, salud in a Cassidy Villebrin Baracus at Dilanoal, Huntatin da Dunzinege, National Indigenous Peoples Day, Yansanoal, Hol Nunat Mental Health Basu, the Pride Community Pride Month, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Huntu addictions, Usig and other, and it's important mental health. Bagayatiha, just to just like all those other topics, you know, mental health. One day, hopefully, boring it'll be easier for us to talk about instead of you know, take that stigma away, that little bit of resistance to reach out. You know, maybe we can do that. Alla, kodelyare hanadaha, dagar sugauli. But it's en bala doon zinige, maybe gabinde I'm headed up north. I'll be lalash to Jureche. I'll be going to visit up there. So if we see each other, say hi, say what's up, and Masi Chona Hosian doing Zinigas or Anselot in a, and once again Cassidy Barakis no Halhun Tatin Daha. Yeah, doing Ziniga Happy National and Indigenous Peoples Day once again. No Baral Leo. Go partake in all the activities. Be proud. Dennis Utlina Dotlina. Te Kola de Garno Basugale Masi Cho si Willis Janvier Hushe and Telas Tours in La Loche, Saskatchewan. Clearwater River Dene Nation band member the Hislu and Dunziniga Treaty Fort territory, home of the Cree, Métis, Sioux, Assiniboine, Dakotas, Lakotas, and myself, Dennis Ushlina. Have a good day. Ho.